everyone. My name is Corey Benke. I'm the co-founder of LiveX. We are a streaming company in New York City. I've been the chairperson of the Live Streaming Summit now fourth year, I believe. Really excited to have this event downtown LA. Welcome. I'm really excited about this panel. We actually have some pretty killer on it. And so I'll get right going. To my right, I have Mr. Dan Sweeney, Vice President Awesome. I've got Stephen Condon. He is the founder of Roogle Marketing. Alex Lindsay did not make the billing, but I'm very excited to have him on our panel. He's a live stream consultant in the industry for a long, long time. I'll tell you where all of the encoders are buried. Daniel Houze, he is the lead engineer at BC Live. Really amazing captioning, encoding engineer, and all these guys. We have a great panel right into corporate streaming. I know it's the most exciting title you've ever heard in your life. So my first thing I want to ask these guys, I'm going to start with you, Dan, is what are you seeing in 2019? The new trend, just kind of one new trend for this year that you're really seeing in corporate streaming.
It's kind of the tail end of this trend, but certainly for us, Internet LinkedIn, we've been using peer delivery for content delivery within the network, and that makes our IT folks very, very happy, and we've seen a lot of different options there. So we used to use something that was really one of two maybe options out there, and now there are a lot more options out there. So I've seen that use of peer delivery broaden.
Awesome. I want to talk about that a little bit later. A lot of people call it ECDN or the peer streaming side of the internal corporate networks. Stephen?
So just by way of background, I'm a marketing guy, but I spent a lot of time in the streaming space. And most recently, I was with Hive Streaming, which has a peering application that helps enterprises stream live events. But what have I seen in the last 12 months? I think the two big dynamics are affecting the continued growth of streaming within the enterprise. The growing support and embracing of streaming by applications such as Microsoft Teams and Skype and other applications that everyone is using on a day-to-day basis, which are encouraging the use of video. And the other thing is that streaming behind the enterprise firewall is becoming a lot more network friendly. As Dan mentioned, the peer-to-peer applications are becoming more accepted now, and the support of peer-to-peer streaming by WebRTC, I think, is also accelerating the growth of live video within the enterprise, and also the support of the network engineers of live streaming events. So I think those two dynamics have continued the acceleration this year.
Alex?
I think I'm going to agree that the peer-to-peer is an important thing. The peer-to-peer has been around for a decade, and all of us have dealt with it for a long time in very painful spits and spats. I think in the early stages it was mostly Contiki or Collective, and now that Workplace and other platforms have started to support it. We're seeing not only a jump in usage, but also a jump in quality, where we're actually getting a pretty high quality stream, inside of a corporate network. So I think that that's probably one of the bigger ones. The other trend that we're seeing is a move. There's this move away from GoToMeeting and WebEx towards something better. And what people don't want necessarily is a full-on video production, but what they do want is something better than that. Mm-hmm. And so there's this kind of in-between world that is starting to occur where corporations want something to improve that process, and those can be relatively low level. Skype empowers some of that. The new Blackmagic switcher, this tiny little switcher that's there, empowers the little A10 Mini, empowers things like that. Now, obviously Zoom and other things are there, but even those, when you're trying to do it all inside the platform, you tend to be very limited by that platform unless they really put a lot of tools in. And so we're seeing, light hardware for kind of corporate plus, something that is starting to appear in a lot of places.
This is great. This is like exactly what I want to talk about. Daniel?
I think on our side, a lot of those things the gentlemen are saying here One thing that strikes to me is that we just had several large clients do some large worldwide acquisitions. And so I think captions and translation are now, they used to be kind of thought of as sort of fluff and, oh, it'd be nice if we could do this. And now it's sort of it's just sort of a given that you're going to do some kind of captioning and translation, both in the room for people in the actual audience, but also live for your web player and on VOD, certainly. And so there's a lot of challenges and a lot of fun around that. It's a big passion of mine, so we've been having a lot of fun.
I think it's great. I'm going to bump up one of my questions because it seemed like, you know, what some people call eCDN, just as a just simply, right? Because a lot of people don't understand. So we had a client, I can say Coach, who came to us and they had been doing their fashion show. And their problem was not that they could use Facebook and Twitter and YouTube to get the fashion show out to their audience. Their problem was in their internal network at Hudson Yards in Manhattan. So we're talking about a place that has amazing transmission and transport capabilities, all the best fiber. Inside their own internal networks, they couldn't actually watch the stream. Twice it happened to them. And they came to us and they said, hey, why is it on YouTube and we can't watch our stream internally? So, you know, can someone just kind of take this from me? Why do they have this problem? I mean, I know, but just for people that are trying to do corporate streaming, when they have this client come to them, you know, what is the problem inherently that's happening?
Well, the problem is you're dealing with, without an ECDN, you're dealing with unicast streams, right? So if you've got everyone sitting in a particular location requesting a 1.7 megabit stream, they're all trying to pull those 1.7 megabit streams through the network access point that's serving that location. And the network access points aren't built to deliver hundreds or thousands of simultaneous 1.7 megabit streams trying to cram through a network access point. So what an ECDN attempts to do is solve for that problem by having one stream coming in through that network access point, and then either hardware that may be in that location serving it out from that point behind that network access point, or via peering software which would either reside in people's browsers or within their player that allows people through allows people to share a stream effectively. So one person pulls that stream in, that person's the leader, and then subsequent viewers will pull from that person. And there's all sorts of complexities around how that's done and who's selected leaders and who's not and how it migrates from one leader to another, but that's fundamentally how peering software would work.
I think in more of just a layman's terms, if you're new to all of this and you're just kind of diving into corporate streaming, one of our clients, they're a medical institution, and you know their circuit is like 100 meg circuit, maybe up and down. And so I had a producer say to me over there, I don't understand. We're like this huge medical company. We should be able to do this. Well, yeah, maybe some of you are trying to view a YouTube video or something online during your lunch break, or you're trying to just download emails and social media, but you're not all trying to do it at the same time. So it's really just, like you were saying, it's more just about a pipe and not having a big enough pipe to serve all of those people trying to access that content all at the exact same time.
And the other problem is the nature of live is that it's very sensitive to any kind of variation.
Yeah.
So if everyone's watching YouTube videos, you know, those things are caching when they can, and it's not putting the same pressure on it if it loses a little bit of, if there's time where it doesn't work. It's why, for instance, if you're doing a corporate event and you have someone jump in over Skype and they're on Wi-Fi, they may have a really fast connection, but that Wi-Fi is dropping packets all the time, just by the number of devices walking past it, you know, because your Wi-Fi access point is sitting there going, hey, how's it going? Hey, look, check, you know, and doing all this stuff, and it's very ADD, and so you losing packets when you're surfing YouTube doesn't matter. You losing packets when you're on a low latency connection to an event, you start to see what we call phasing, which is you start seeing someone jitter, or you hear kind of this slightly robotic tone in their voice. That's Wi-Fi. You know, that's losing connection.
And then, you know, so in the past, when I've done ECDN type solutions, Stephen, you kind of alluded to this, we've done a hardware approach. So we've taken a piece of hardware, we've put it into an IT closet, And the IT network, that took months to do, typically in a corporate environment. What are some of the ways that people are solving this problem that's not hardware, right? If I come in and a coach says to me, hey, what is the solution? So Hive is one of them, Workplace. What does Workplace give me? Is it that is it that they whitelist the cloud server that's doing the endpoint?
Okay, so just the original company doing peering was Contiki. There were others that emerged that got bought by Akamai, but they haven't really, they bought those companies, but really haven't rolled out services for enterprise streaming. Hive came along, and there are others coming out. There's Peer 5 out there that does an enterprise streaming. There's Strive that does an enterprise peer-to-peer streaming product as well, which is a newer, smaller company. But basically, they're all the same approach. But the big development in peering has been moving away from installed software, which adds complexity to an enterprise deployment when you've got to update for operating system changes or whatever else. And IT guys don't like installing software
Steve,
on
when you
people's
say
devices.
software, you're talking about in each individual client.
Yeah, each individual
So each it would have to be built into their
each
yeah.
individual device.
yeah.
What the
Which is a
biggest
standard configuration for
Yeah.
something like Contiki, Collective.
But what's happened in the past 12 months or past 2 years is that WebRTC has become more mature. Players such as Hive and Contiki, I think, just recently announced that they have WebRTC versions of their product which augments their installed agents, which extends your reach to mobile devices for peering. And WebRTC will be supported by the new Microsoft Edge browser. It's already supported by Chrome. And so this support means that you don't have to install software on the end devices. That comes as a line of code in the browser that utilizes the WebRTC protocol to enable peering. So there's no end user device maintenance required. It's just a line of code in the player effectively. So it makes enterprise streaming very lightweight and easier to do, and WebRTC extends to devices. Now, there are some advantages to having installed agents in terms of the control that you have over where things peer from, but for a lot of companies, WebRTC is a good enough solution.
Yeah, and 5-6 years ago when I first started LinkedIn, that was the first task, was to figure out how to solve this particular problem. And that was relatively early days of peering. There weren't a lot of options out there. We ended up going Contiki, which is now Collective. But it took months of security checks, and we happened to be part of the same group that is IT, but IT is not usually keen on peering. They start thinking about BitTorrent and all kinds of things, so it puts them off. So it's not an insignificant thing to change that rollout ability to be able to do it through the browser. That can be a big blocker for corporations. Between that and this, if you're already struggling with network access and throughput, and then asking the IT team to go through and make sure these are installed on all the imaging of all the different computers, that can definitely slow down deployment.
So how did you guys end up solving that then, when you had like an obstacle to, hey, you can't bring in hardware, and I have a problem with peering if I'm your IT administrator?
Yeah, I'm a bad example of that because we're lucky. So LinkedIn relationships matter, and we had good relationships with the IT team and the networking team, so they were open to it and keen. But that's not, I think that's rare at places. So you have to, either the vendor has to sort of sell it a little bit, or you, if you're the one trying to implement it in your company, you have to sell it. But that said, it's everywhere now, so it shouldn't be as much pushback.
And WebRTC
Right.
versions of
Yeah.
this service are much less onerous in terms of IT. So
Well, and not to belabor ECDN and not to get too much in the weeds, but to your point about WebRTC, what I'm hearing is, and tell me if I'm correct, if I'm using a hardware solution, I'm using some kind of cloud public whitelisting solution, the thing that WebRTC peering gives me is that I probably don't have to go to a network administrator to figure it out, because the platform itself is helping me to solve this problem.
exactly, yep.
But that in itself can make a lot of IT guys nervous in itself, right? Not understanding. So I think there's an educational aspect to that too, right? Especially some companies are big on NIST, which is a big securities and protocol initiative. You're talking, 6-8 months of dialogue, right, and education, I think. So that's important to bake into your plan.
I mean, fundamentally, almost all of these come down to someone in a C-suite making a decision and saying, "This is what we have to do.
This is what we're going to use. Make
And
it
then-
happen.
Well, we have to have a solution,
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
because no one's going to stick their neck out lower than that until someone high enough up says, we need to have a solution that gets video out to our employees. You know, like
Yeah.
it has
Which happens when they're speaking. And
Right.
It doesn't work.
exactly.
That's when the
Yeah.
check is
So
signed.
then they go, how can we never have
project
this
is
happen again?
created,
That's the
yeah.
typical conversation. And they're like, okay.
Well, and it's funny because people that, so LiveX, we typically do entertainment, sports, news. We don't do a lot of internal corporate streaming. And that's one of the things that we're seeing a lot more where people are asking those type of questions, right?
Right.
They expect, if you're doing corporate streaming, they expect those answers to be solved by you as a vendor.
Having been involved in a lot of engagements in this space, most of them happen because the CEO comes from another company. He says, I used to be able to webcast live to all employees at my previous company. Why can't I do it here? It needs to be solved. And then everyone scrambles to solve it. And I think we're in these days where there's a much bigger call for transparency from the C-suite. Being able to communicate with people via live video, a CEO sitting at his desk and being able to fire up, you know, an application and schedule a webcast with all employees is something that they want to be able to do. It's, you know, they don't want to have to drag everyone in and across the street, across through the snow to get to a
To do an
conference
all
room,
hands.
to do an all hands.
Yeah.
And so I think the drive to transparency is also accelerating the growth of this market as well.
Well, and that's a perfect segue into the next thing I want to talk about, which is web conferencing tools versus broadcast streaming live tools, right? So, you know, we had a client, I'm going to bring up another example because for me it kind of works if it's like, okay, I have this example. I have a client, they are a mid-sized startup, they sell cars, and they use Zoom for their conferencing. Love Zoom, I think it's a good product, Zoom, WebEx, what have you. One of their problems is that they don't like the way the slides look in Zoom because of the transcoding quality. And so they want to move to a different solution. So right now they're moving to live stream Vimeo because they feel like the quality is not good. And what I've been seeing is a lot of web conferencing software is starting to kind of merge with what I would call broadcasting live software. So, you know, I'd love for you guys to kind of speak to that and some of the things that you're seeing in that space and some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, we use Teams, Microsoft Teams. Microsoft owns LinkedIn. We use Zoom. We use Blue Jeans Primetime. We use all the different ones. And so Primetime, if you're not aware, is essentially their streaming solution. So it's a step up from their regular Blue Jeans call. And we do see the mix of those. We're lucky in that every meeting room, basically LinkedIn has a pretty complex VC system that will talk directly to those tools, or it's getting there on most of those tools. But it is that in between where we're not there with a control room and an elemental and all the production that goes with it, but you still need to get out to a number of people. Now, luckily, those smaller groups tend to have less viewers, so we don't need peering on those, like just the unicast streams or however they're being delivered from Primetime and Zoom and Teams is working. But everybody wants to do a stream now. We have our company all hands every 2 weeks that we crank out. Every group within LinkedIn has an all hands that might be hundreds instead of thousands. But as companies grow, I'm sure maybe you guys have examples of larger companies that are doing multiple all hands and they hit that issue. But we are seeing there's a different team at LinkedIn that owns video conferencing, but we work extremely closely together because they are, you know, the equipment's overlapping and the players are overlapping.
All the enterprise platforms are improving their ability to do live webcasting and integrating it with their applications that they have out there. You know, Microsoft's been very aggressive over the past 12 months in terms of what they're doing with Teams. And the back end to that, you can enable Hive or Collective in the back end of those applications now so that you can enable a live webcast within your enterprise. The encoding tools are improving and the selections that you can do, they're all integrated with the platforms now. I know Google is pushing down the same path. Facebook with Workplace definitely is as well. So all of these companies are looking to make live webcasting a high quality experience through the encoding products they have in the back end that you can access as a licensor of their platform and through the ability to distribute that video within the enterprise through integrated tools as well, or products such as, whether it's Hive or Contiki or Strive or Peer5 or whatever, these platforms will be utilized by those applications to improve the quality.
And that's all come from expectations, as far as I can tell, meaning the rest of this conference is talking about how you're gonna watch the Super Bowl streaming and latency and all those other pieces, and people come to work and expect the same level. They expect the same level of production, ideally. They expect the same level of quality, and they're not interested in the intricacies of why it doesn't work on the network or any of that. They just want it to work, right?
Well, and a lot of times what we think of is like, I work with so many different companies that we don't really care what the encoding is. We can plug into Zoom or Blue Jeans or YouTube or Contiki or whatever you want to put it into. What we really think about is creatively, how are we going to tell a story, for the executives. And so with some of our clients, they're building studios. The studios that have worked the best have a small crew, or a medium-sized crew, either in-house or freelance for
Which
that.
is a hard sell for a small to mid-sized company.
It is. And so the difficulty is that even the large companies want to have kind of a I can run it myself kind of thing. But the problem is when you dumb down the studio to a point where it can do that, it tends not to look very good or sound very good or be very good. So and a lot of times what we have to look at is content is either going to be hard to make or it's going to be hard to watch. And you have to pick one. And I think most people are constantly focused on hard to make. Like, I want to make it easy to make, so then I make it hard to watch. It's boring, it doesn't move very fast. We're used to looking at extremely high quality content. Everything from our TV that we watch, the bar is very high.
Yeah.
I mean, even TikTok is doing better than most corporate. And those are amateurs that are doing it, in their backyard. So the challenge is how do we keep up with that? And so studios are one piece of that. One thing that we found for low budget that has worked really well is actually using like Skype TX boxes. And so what we do is, for the end product or the end client, they're just a webcam with an extra camera, an extra light, an earpiece, and a webcam and a nice mic, and they sound and look relatively good. And then we bring those into Skype TX. We then push those into a switcher, and then we switch the show. And it's very much, if anyone's ever heard of twit.tv, which is something that I host every once in a while. That's how their whole network runs, right? And so everybody comes in over Skype and individual units. Now they have their own little Mac Minis or PCs or whatever they're doing it with, but Skype TX boxes work really well for that.
And I would take that one further just because I'm always going to punch down. So I'm going to find the cheaper thing, which is vMix Call, right? Where it's a WebRTC product, very similar to Skype TX, where I can have vMix loaded on a laptop. I can send a link to someone and it works really well. That same way, and I can get it into the switcher, right?
And admittedly, I'm very much like I just want SDI signals coming out and hardware and hardware switchers.
The same thing.
So
where I can send a link to someone, and then back in my control room, I've got SDI and vMix is coming in SDI, and I'm in my switcher.
So however that works, but having all those folks individually available.
Yep.
And then we've built some pretty complex ones for conferences. We did a 3-day conference for one of our clients that basically they had 25 speakers, one moderator that was in San Jose, and then 25 speakers all over the U.S. And for 3 days, what we were doing is we're bringing in 2 or 3 speakers at a time for one session, a session like this. So it'd be like us sitting here talking. Now, what we're doing on our end, because we have that as individual feeds, this is what kind of brings it up from Zoom, is we're bringing it in, we're doing super sources. I mean, it looked like CNN. We're replaying all their graphics. We're doing lower thirds, opens, all the playouts, all the things that they want to do. So you end up with a relatively high-end experience, which actually looks and sounds better than most studios that the corporations have in their buildings.
Yep.
Because you're only worried about the typical talking head and that kind of solution has been very compelling, for a lot of our clients. And it gives us a way to centralize all of our hardware. So we're not even worried about bringing them in anywhere. We just need to just call them all and have it there. So you can be sitting in a closet, running a show that has speakers from all over and thousands of viewers.
Which, you know, what, 10 years ago you were using, or even 5 years ago, for a high enough client, you're using satellite for that, right? You're using satellite trucks, bringing everybody back,
or the
fiber,
switch, or
right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Danny, you want to speak to that?
I can just speak to just a tiny little thing. I think it all comes down to what you're trying to deliver and the product that you're trying to use. So for example, when you're wanting to do back and forth, and again, this might be go to somebody who is just diving into corporate streaming, or this isn't necessarily your thing, because a lot of times it's like the marketing teams and it's like, you know, some of the other teams that are trying to pull this off. Something like a Blue Jeans or a Zoom or a Skype is pretty instant, right? So when you're talking from one person to the other, those things are happening, you know, right away. But when we're talking about live streaming to many different employees, that is often a different technology, is it not, right?
Yep.
So it's important to understand those two differences, that a lot of times it ends up being sort of a hybrid, right, as in life. So, you know, you may have a Skype call, like using the TX boxes, or Zoom, that is connecting two people so they can connect back and forth really, really fast. But then your overall show that's going to your 5,000 employees across the globe would be using a more traditional CDN, like Livestream or IBM, or, you know, one of the others that are out there. So it's important also kind of to know the differences of those two and how they interact.
And some of those platforms will do both. So I'm pretty sure Blue Jeans Primetime essentially is using its traditional VC infrastructure for the point-to-point, and you can basically up-level someone, and then it becomes.
I was going to ask you that because I was going to bring up. So not to plug Blue Jeans, but for a lot of our AV and corporate clients, where we come in, they'll be like, "Hey, I'm using WebEx, or I'm using this," and I've actually found Blue Jeans is a good jackknife, because typically it will work with all those other platforms. So we'll use that license to kind of use that to be like, "Oh, I can pull WebEx, I can pull this," but I didn't realize Primetime must be their multicast, right?
I don't know if it's multicast. I actually don't know the mechanism, but it's essentially when you get over, I don't know, I forget what the number is. Maybe it's 1,000 or 100 or whatever the number is.
It's more for broadcasting to a
But
larger
those products won't solve your network problems.
They will
Right.
not.
No, will not.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Right. Okay, I want to talk about something that we've actually been having to deal with a lot, and how we've solved it, which is captioning. So typically, captioning was used for government and politics because it's an accessibility issue for the users, and there's a legal version. So if you have university clients, if you have government clients, you've experienced captioning. We have a client now, owned by Group 9, that we do a lot of politics for, and we use our captioner. We typically transport our stream back and then do captioning. Because I'm cheap, I started with a Link Electronics product, and then I eventually moved up to the, Dan Houze actually told me to buy, what's the one that we have now? The
EEG.
EEG,
Yeah.
which I believe the EEG is the one, right? I think that's the main captioner. It's like $10,000. It's crazy. But I want you guys to just kind of speak to captioning, you know, what you've seen in the last 12 months with accessibility issues on streams, especially for corporate.
Yeah, we've been early on in captions at LinkedIn, and Microsoft is actually ahead of us, though. On captions, we use the EEG 492 unit. We use it with services, so the audio is essentially sent out to a service. We often use re-speakers that re-speak it back in, but you can obviously be typing it in too. We're just starting to play with the Lexi product, which I think they're talking about here, which is AI captions. You're either going to do the captioning at the source, at the encoder level, or you're doing it on the player. So Teams meeting, not Teams broadcast, will do AI captions, and they're surprisingly accurate right in the player. So, and it seems to be the same engine that's doing why can I not remember what's the Microsoft version of Keynote? What is it called?
PowerPoint.
That's the one.
You know this is going to be put out.
Yeah. What a thing to forget.
Edit that.
PowerPoint has AI captions built in. If you just fire up the web version of it, I'm sure it's the same engine. It's surprisingly useful, and we use it. There is the accessibility piece of it. There is English as a second language piece of it. There is transcription part of it. There is searchability later on our platform, so you can use that to search. There are many benefits, and I think, you know, if AI is on track as it seems to be, that's going to be pretty much a no-brainer on
Well, and I just want to take this back. So to your point, like typically in our workflow, we will have a captioner remotely come in through an audio version of the program. There'll be a captioner somewhere in the U.S. or wherever. There'll be a manually putting the transcription in. The data will come back to the captioner and get put out over SMPTE for the captioning to get into either the Facebook player or the YouTube player, burn in Microsoft player. So that's the workflow I'm currently talking about. With AI, I actually had the largest captioning company come to our office, Vitek. They do Fox and they do CNN. And he said to me, he was like, if your captioning is 99% right, it's still wrong. Like, if you're the president of the United States or whoever, right, and you're a political speaker, and the captioning's only 99% right, that one time it's going to be like really bad, right? That it's wrong. So
If you're the president of the United States, you might just say things wrong anyway. Not to get too political.
that's a whole different issue.
Bad example.
Yeah, bad example. Bad analogy.
But I think it's a good sense to know that when you do captioning, there is a huge number of liability issues that come with it.
Yeah.
Because now you have a separate version of the truth that's coming out from somebody that's typing. And so when we work with AI solutions, a lot of times one of the big things that I want to see is dictionaries. I want to have words that the AI will never solve to. And I have words that the AI knows exist and can use that waveform to grab onto it. So we know that these are because a lot of times I work on product launches.
But would you ever,
So-
right now, would you ever use an AI captioning solution?
We have not used AI caption solutions for the level of event that I mostly work on.
Right.
So we still have a person, and that person then also has to see all the rehearsals. That's a really thing that a lot of people miss. So one of the funny thing, the culture of captionists, and you can tell me, is that they show up like right before the event,
Yep.
and then they do the event. And now a good captioner, caption group will, they'll want to see the slides, and a lot of times you end up with security issues. You're launching a big product, you're going to have theoretically lots of people viewing. They don't want to send out the slides, and they don't want, so a lot of times we'll have captioners come in. And they get to watch it. They get to, if they want to take notes, there's a computer that they can take notes on that's taped down and not connected to the internet. They get to sit there and watch the rehearsal, take the notes that they want to. They can come back and work on it there, but there's no way to bring it out. But they get that accurate information. It is a huge jump in quality of your captioning, especially in a technical conference or a technical release. To have someone actually know what the words are and understand the context of it as it's coming through. So that becomes really important from a captioning perspective. The AI stuff is getting very good, and some of the stuff that I've seen that's about to become available everywhere, because it is getting to be almost as accurate, and especially if you can start putting the dictionaries in, it's almost as accurate. And a lot of times, one of the things that we're not taking enough advantage of, that we slip our encoders, our buffers, so that we can slowly pull the text in to closer to the person
Line
talking.
up better, yeah.
So typically, you're looking at a human latency of 3 to 5 seconds is typically the human latency of typing, listening and typing, but we have. If we're not doing low latency streaming, we have 20 seconds, 26 seconds, 15 seconds, somewhere in that range of latency to the viewer. So how do we get that text in to line up with the audio, with the audio of the a little bit more effectively? And so those are things.
What's the latency with AI?
AI is less than a second.
Yeah,
And a lot of times with some of those solutions that people are starting to work on is they're self-correcting it. So it's because it's using the waveform to create the words. It can then realign the text with the so the accuracy. We definitely use AI for a lot of our post-production
Syncing, right?
So later. So
Yeah.
Usually we don't find it using the captions that we took live for the final product is worth it. So usually we'll push that out to either a service or we use AI to basically get another version of it, and that's often going to be a lot tighter timed than what we're doing. And then we'll still go through it. We'll go through it and actually fine tune regardless of what we're doing. And a lot of times this can be iterations. You can have the live version, and then right after the live version, you throw up another version that was like you corrected a couple things that you saw during the show that were really bad. And then you have a cleaned up version 24 hours later that is perfect.
Well, and I just want to speak to your liability. So one thing we had to get recently was errors and omissions insurance. So that's something to think about when you're doing captions. I never had to experience that in my life before, but as soon as we started doing captions, that was a thing that we had to get. So.
And translation becomes an issue too, because
Yep.
now you have translation on top of there's a lot of different ways that it can be.
My only advice to you, especially when your CTOs and other people come to you and say, hey, we have AI captioning now. This is going to be so much easier and we don't have to deal with it. Don't forget about dialect and don't forget about the quality of your audio. Because if you have a speaker that is not a native English speaker, that's dialing in, or if you have audio that you're not hearing just that speaker clearly, and we know that every corporate stream the audio is perfect. There's never any issues. That's a joke, folks. Come on now. There's smiles. I love
They
it.
can't hear you.
There you go. So those are just two little pointers there. Once you jump into that AI world, and I encourage you to dibble and dabble into it, is that very clear audio as best as possible, and really work on or think about how that will affect the dialects that you may be working with in your corporate stream.
What as we kind of wrap this up, we're getting to almost time. I want to talk about 2020. So, what are some things that either you're looking forward to, some ways where you think 2020 is coming? What are some things we should be thinking about when it comes to corporate streaming?
I think that the thing that we keep on seeing slowly evolving is interactivity. So interacting with the audience. I mean, in my opinion, there's really only 3 reasons to go live, which is news, sports, or interactivity. If you're not doing that with your audience, if you're doing a corporate stream that doesn't include the audience, it's a huge risk with not a lot of payoff. And so we see a little of that, people answering a couple comments during the show, but the areas where we see our clients spending half or more of the time just answering questions, you suddenly see a huge rise in average view time, a huge rise in excitement about seeing the streams. And you don't do it once and then say, oh, well, it worked or not. It's the companies that are doing it over and over and over again, where they train their employees that this is going to be a two-way conversation with them. And as people start to realize they're actually going to be heard, more people will come to the streams, more people make it a priority, more people watch longer, because now and it also, that interactivity changes the way the viewer listens, because they go from being a passive viewer that are just kind of like oftentimes putting the window up in the corner and continuing to work, to an active listener because they're thinking of questions that they want to ask.
What are some tools that you are liking in the space that help with interactivity, specifically corporate? You might use Workplace for a client, but then
So we built all the tools that we use.
right.
So
Right,
So
but-
yeah. So we don't like anybody's
what are
tools.
some tools that what are some tools that poor guys like me can buy?
Here's
that
a
you
fun
like?
hint that I still love to this day is literally create a bit.ly short code and put that up on the screen in the top left corner of your screen and say if you want to ask a question with your smartphone, pull that out and go to this link, right? That's a simple one.
Yep.
Or text your question to this link.
Yep.
And we saw, again, you're talking about things rise. We saw interactivity really respond to that people kind of like the anonymity of just asking a question. They might be sitting in the room and the guy's right up here, or they might be over in Berlin watching the same stream. But it's cool to give them that ability to just use a smartphone while they're watching the stream somewhere else or live in person.
And if you're in a platform like whether it's an internal platform that has it or Workplace or whatever, if you can the comments are a place that people can ask questions. So that's the easiest one. And then, I mean, the low grade, where we started when we started doing this was literally cutting and pasting those into Google Docs or doing whatever to kind of put that together. Our frustration with that is what built a bunch of other tools that lock into the back end that let us manage, for low frequency events that works really well. So once you get over 100 interactions a minute, you start to have issues with being able to sort, and so that becomes, so what we had to figure out was how do you manage, high frequency events.
I think IBM, sorry, you were But I think IBM Stream also has a really good solution. Their Q&A module has been really nice because it allows people to enter in that question, but then you can choose, does everybody see that question that was entered, or is there a moderator on the back end, probably similar tools that you've custom built. But that's a really nice player. Microsoft Stream, I think, will get there. Right now, everything that you type in is just public to everybody, but at least with a tool like IBM's Q&A module, you can choose if you want that question to be approved and everybody sees it, or just nobody sees it, and then it goes to a little iPad, which is often how we do it. And then the leader of that meeting just looks at the iPad and sees the questions coming in and decides, oh, what do we want to answer, you know?
Dan?
Microsoft Stream uses, you can also tie that in with Yammer. We use Microsoft or Teams Broadcast, which is basically, the engine under that is Stream. That has a Q&A feature that we're working on to get that dialed in, but that has polling and up-leveling and thumbs up and all the good stuff. The other piece of it is it's not just the interaction that your panel or your group is talking to other people, it's those people talking to each other. So if I shift gears slightly, go a bit of a shill for LinkedIn Live, that's where you have comments going in there, and those are people that are already, if someone's watching the same thing, your chances are you guys have something in common that you can then interact over, and you're seeing those people as they comment. So you have that cross discussion with your tribe, if you will, of people who are interested in a similar thing. So it's not, there's interactivity to the presenter, but there's also interactivity between folks, and then you really get a sense of community.
Right,
And
which
also-
goes to the community, right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And also the thing to remember is that if you're doing a large stream with a relatively medium to high frequency event, that the person on stage doesn't have to be the only person answering questions. So what you can do is promote questions to the stage for things that will be answered there, but you can answer all the other questions with a team in the back end.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
That's really critical, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to open up questions,
Right.
answer them all. I'm like religious about that. Steven, did you want to kind of
I just
weigh
think
in?
all the applications, unified communications applications that are sort of taking over corporate America are continuing to push video forward, and the thing that's been holding them back is the networking issue associated with video. And again, back to the WebRTC applications that are going to be integrated with all these platforms and available to all these users is just going to continue to reduce the barrier to successful live streaming with enterprises. So, I think the demand and the requirement to support live streaming within the enterprise the pressure's going to continue to mount as these environments people are living in are going to continue to push video as something that's a critical part of the platform. So, my prediction is that 2020 will probably be the year that live video becomes much more commonplace than what it is now.
And easier, right?
And easier,
More.
yeah.
All right, I want to take, if anybody has any questions for our panel, I will take them now before we wrap up. Any questions out there?
Anybody using Slido?
Yeah, we do actually use Slido. So I don't know if you guys are aware
What's
of that.
Slido?
It's a, how to describe it, it's a question and answer. So you actually give a short link of a Slido link, and the questions come up there, and then they get up-leveled. So you can put that in. I think it'll embed with Livestream even, and some other tools.
Oh, cool.
So anything specific about it, or you haven't used it?
I just didn't hear it mentioned.
Yeah.
We're also shutting it off during the event. If you finally get this audience together, you want them to pay attention if it's really good critical
Right.
information.
Yeah.
We actually have in a lot of the events that we've had, we actually don't put mics in anymore. So if you have a Q&A system, we don't want people to stand up and ask any questions. We want them to use the tool. And the reason for that is that half their question is them pontificating about something that they want to say. And it also, you have no idea, they're a wild card as soon as they stand up. When they ask a question, especially if you have some kind of voting system, we built a system for a decade ago for the World Bank, and I think they use it pretty much all the time. They use some version of that for almost everything, because it tightens the meeting, because you don't have, especially with diplomats, but it tightens the meeting where you now you have just the right questions. The panelist knows, the moderator, you have control over it, and once you get used to it, you don't ever want to go back to mics.
Now you've put the pressure on the next person to ask a question.
What?
Put a lot of pressure on the next person.
Not for a show like this. That was a perfect question. But I'm saying, in general for large things.
Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you. I want to thank my
I shut that
panelists.
down.
Thank you for the first one of Live Streaming Summit. And we will be available for questions after if you want to come talk to us. Thank you.